Hello, everyone, and welcome to Capes, Cows, and Masks. Now, this is a bit of a different affair to our usual show. Pretty much soon after we finished our new show this week, we heard the tragic and sad news that Richard Donner had passed away. Passed away a few days ago on July 5th. He was 91 years old, and he's obviously known for so many wonderful films. Superman, The Goonies, The Omen, Lethal Weapon, so many fantastic movies. So we thought we'd take the time and create this space for him to celebrate him and his movies and his impact on the industry and on us personally. So I've got with me today Tom Gapper and our very special guest, Rob Ayling, because I feel as if between me and Rob, we've talked so many times about Richard Donner's Superman films. I feel like I had to get you on. So, Rob, I'll start with you. First of all, thank you for agreeing to come on the show and do this with us. But what were your sort of initial reactions when you heard the news?
First of all, thank you for having me on. It feels weird to say it's an honor to be back on because it's, quite a sad time. And a sad time to be brought back on because, of course, we're it's not going to be all sad, I should mention, but it's more of a celebration, of course. This is going to be me acknowledging the fact that this is one of the most prolific filmmakers for me. And when you don't hear from somebody from a long time, you just do get that sense of worry. It was almost like that in a way. And because he was quite a vocal individual anyway, like about certain movies that were coming out or certain directors. I know Christopher Nolan was a huge fan of his work, and he would go on all the time about him. And he did a fantastic talk in 2017 with the cast of Lethal Weapon at the American Film Institute, and talking about how it meant to be a director and how he became a director. And he said it was mainly all about luck. And sometimes a healthy bit of luck is what you need to get by in life. And, I always say, do you know what? I would always fundamentally say, while that is true, I think it also does help to have a little bit of craftsmanship along the way. And when you think of Richard Donner, you think of craft. And his portfolio of work really cements that absolutely. And not just, we'll probably talk a lot about the Superman movies, of course, but The Omen, Goonies, and even films like Maverick, which do get underlooked. I do think he was one of the most important filmmakers and still is one of the most important filmmakers of our time. And it's just such a shame. And he lived to a good age. So I'm going to raise my coffee to the late, great Richard Donner.
Very well said, Rob. Very well said. Tom, how about yourself? What were your reactions upon seeing the news?
Well, I think, like everyone, I was just very, very sad hearing it. Very, very sad. Because he definitely had a huge influence on me. I mean, when I heard the news, I was thinking back, obviously, to the Superman films. And thinking about it, that was really my first exposure to just the concept of superheroes. It definitely would have been one of the first things I ever saw that had anything to do with superheroes, and which is quite fitting considering it's Superman. And it blew me away. And just even now, it still blows me away, because if you think about it, a Superman film being made in the 70s, by all accounts, should have been a film where now we look back and we kind of laugh at it and think oh my God, it's actually so bad. And yet it's not. You look back on it and it's still a genius piece of work. And it clearly has influenced superhero films since. Any film with superheroes that actually wants to take itself seriously and be a success models itself after Richard Donner's work. I know he also served as a producer for the X-Men films. I don't know quite to what capacity, but that just shows again his links to the comic book films. And I think it's definitely a sadder place without him in the world. And I think as well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention an actual link he has to comic books, which was that he actually wrote a run of Action Comics alongside Jeff Johns. Jeff Johns was, of course, an assistant of his back in the 90s, which is how they came to know each other. But they did some great, great stories on that. Really great stuff. And I urge people to pick it up. It was a run coming out of 2006. I can't remember which issues, but definitely worth a read. I'm definitely going to be rereading them. And probably watching all the Superman films and all the Lethal Weapon films as well, because I love those things. I love them. So yeah, definitely, the world is definitely a worse off place without Richard Donner in it. It's very sad to see him go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when I first saw the news, it was complete shock to me at first, because I view Richard Donner as one of those people that you go, he can't die. You know, they're cemented in like history and legacy that you almost see them as beyond human, that you're like, they are immortal. They can never die, you know, protect them at all sort of costs. So it was a huge shock to me. But at the same time, 91 years old, he's lived a very long and fulfilled life. And yeah, like you guys, his work influenced me so much. I don't remember the exact time of when I first saw Superman, but I don't really recall a time where I wasn't aware of that film. So it must have been so very, very young when I first was exposed to that. And, you know, as everyone says, has been saying online, and it's on the poster of Superman, he made me believe a man could fly. And, at that time, even in, when I was a kid in the 90s, it was still very unheard of to see superhero flicks. And the ones that they did do, bar obviously Superman and the Batman films, were pretty poor, pretty poor attempts. And as comic fans, we never really got what we deserved. So those Richard Donner Superman movies, I cherished my entire life growing up, because they were sort of the only things we really had, And then, as I grow older, going into films, a lot of the films I found myself watching and admiring, I was like, it's done by Richard Donner. Like, I think back to the fact that he did the original Superman. Like, he redefined the buddy cop genre with Lethal Weapon. And he also created The Goonies, which is a movie that is still talked about today. Like, I'm sure we'll talk a lot about Superman, but when you look at Superman now, like you said, Tom, it's a movie that can be considered cheesy or corny or a bit silly. And, when you compare it to some of the modern day comic book movies, there is elements of that, absolutely. But in 1978, when Donner came to the table, when he wanted to do Superman, he wanted to make it as grounded and believable as possible. And I think we overlook that a lot, because for its time, it was an incredibly grounded movie that should have been silly and cheesy and corny, but for the audience at that time, completely blew them away. You could say it was its own The Dark Knight for its time, for very different reasons. And I think people underestimate, how impactful that movie is. I know you said that Jeff Johns was one of his assistants. Well, as I call him, our Lord and Savior, Kevin Feige, the CEO at Marvel Studios, was Richard Donner's intern. He was there from the very beginning, helping Donner produce the original X-Men films at Fox and stuff like that. And Kevin Feige has said, look, this is the guy at Marvel, and he is the one who has said that the Superman movie is the blueprint for all comic book movies. And he has said himself, the MCU, this juggernaut of a franchise of 24 movies now, would not exist were it not for Richard Donner's Superman. So I think that speaks a lot in itself. But Rob, any other sort of things you'd like to bring up about Richard Donner or his movies?
I mean, I knew about Jeff Johns and Kevin Feige and their involvement, but also their appreciation for the man himself and the work that he has done. And I always say that one of the main reasons we take these, as much as I love the character of Batman and everything, but the Superman movie does have a special place in my heart, because you look back at it and you realize how much it opened the door for the possibilities to make these kind of movies and take them seriously. And funny enough, I watched Superman last night. I sent plenty of videos to Jake, which probably was like, oh, okay, thanks, Rob. Why don't you record the whole movie for me? Why don't you? But there are moments in that film. I mean, even the genius of the cast itself. These are choices that Richard Donner made himself. To say we don't have to cast, these sort of actors, like say TV actors or something like that, and bring them in. We're going to bring in big names So that's the reason why you have Brando and Hackman at the beginning of the film, because they will sell the picture, and then you have an unknown actor to risk your Superman on, who delivers one of the finest superhero performances of all time. But that's through collaboration with Richard Donner, and you just need to see the behind the scenes footage of them laughing and joking together to see that he was a warm and loving individual who allowed people to play in the space that they were in. And also, the one thing I don't think that has been addressed enough really was that he was a fan. He was a huge Superman fan, and there's this incredible story about the original script being complete and utter rubbish.
Apparently it was like 500 pages or something ridiculous.
Yeah, exactly. And it was considered to him absolute rubbish, and yet he took the job on, not just as a filmmaker, knowing that there's potential there, but he did it to save Superman, which I find really astonishing. And and as I said, I watched it yesterday, and there were moments where I was like, things held up here and there, technology wise or whatever, corniness here and there, but I don't care about those things, because what I watched yesterday is still to this day one of the finest crafted superhero films I've ever seen. And you're able to get away with scenes like the interview with Superman and Lois Lane. It's just a wonderful scene. It's a wonderful back and forth of just great direction as well, and the choices of those little small moments of where Clark is trying not to to smirk or anything. These are mannerisms where Feige has clearly looked at that and gone, well, we can have our actors do that now. We can embrace the silliness of this situation. You've got a guy dressed in bright blue and red cape, and you got Lois Lane, who clearly is infatuated with this guy. And it's just wonderfully charming and well played by everybody involved. And again, that comes down to the choices of the director as well, allowing the space and the freedom to play. And not only, as you said earlier, Jake, did he make us believe a man could fly, but he ultimately brought superheroes to the screen and gave us an acceptance and an allowance for us to fully embrace that. And as much as I love this man as well, but whenever the question of are superhero movies cinema, I always would say to Martin Scorsese, look what Richard Donner did with Superman in 1978, and you cannot tell me that's not cinema. It's pure cinema in every single frame. It's a masterpiece.
Couldn't have said it better myself, Rob. Yeah, Tom, while we're on the Superman topic, do you have any stories or things you'd like to say about the Donner Superman movies, or any moments that, particularly you think of when you think of those movies?
It's just so many, to be honest. I mean, like I said, it was like my first exposure to superhero films. So much like you, Jake, I just like grew up constantly like watching it, because there just wasn't that much else out there superhero wise. I mean, standout moments. The whole first film is a standout moment, to be honest. I mean, from start to finish, just like as soon as I put that film on, I'm like hooked. And the second film, at least the Donner cut, which is the only version I watch now, again, it's just sensational.
The original hashtag movement of release the Donner cut.
Yeah,
true.
I mean, the guy brought in Zod, who by all accounts probably should have been a bit ridiculous as a villain, but he was brilliant. I mean, I don't know. It's very hard for me to quantify and like verbalize how much like those two films especially mean to me, because just they are the basis for everything I love about superheroes. Without those films, yeah, sure, we wouldn't have got the MCU, but also without those films, I probably wouldn't have gotten into comics as much as I did. And I think I just think it's very fitting that it is Superman. And I do love the story that you told, Rob, the fact that he took the Superman job because he wanted to save it. I love that. And I think it's a testament to the guy that they apparently had this awful script, this like way too bloated script. And yet what he brought out was just, for the time especially, just perfection. Like, I can't really say a bad word about those films. Like, even the moments where some people think are like, oh, it's a bit too cheesy. Like, oh, he's just like, turning the earth, like turning back time by reversing the earth. Okay, it's kind of ridiculous, but I'm going to defend those moments to the death because he made me love those moments. He made me not care. And again, that's the basis for me, like, getting into superhero comics, where I'm just like, I don't care how ridiculous this seems or how much this doesn't really make sense. I'm just in it for the ride. And yeah, I mean, moving away even from Superman and the Lethal Weapon films, like Jake said, he completely reinvented the buddy cop genre. And like, oh, okay, there may be some things I could point out in the Lethal Weapon films where I'm a bit like, but overall, I love them, and just the direction on them is just great. Like, the action is just so raw and visceral. Even just like small moments where just like Riggs or Murtaugh are just like slapping a guy on the head, it just like seems just so weighty, and just I don't know how he did it. Just like, again, he again made this like ridiculous over the top film seem very real. And also, he got us the amazing diplomatic immunity. Just got revoked. I love that. So that the man was a genius, really. And like, I'll be honest, I don't know how better to put it than what Rob said. To be honest, he got it on point there. But yeah, I think even though it is very sad, obviously he's no longer with us, it's great that we still have this huge body of work of his that we can still just go back to and enjoy, because it will always hold up, because his works are just timeless. Like you said, Goonies, people still talk about the Goonies. Everyone's going to be talking about Superman until the end of time. And hell, Lethal Weapon even, like, that's going to be talked about years to come. So yeah, very sad to see him go, but I'm looking forward to just going through his library of work again and finding a whole new appreciation for it all.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously I'll go back to Superman, but I think it's an absolute classic of cinema, like Rob says. Like, I don't care what anyone says. They say it's cheesy or whatever. Like, it makes me believe what's possible. Now, you get a lot of conversation online nowadays about, everyone's got their own take on Superman. Whose take on Superman is better? Especially, I would say Snyder's take is more like, this is actually how it is, while Donner's is, in a way, he gets Superman in a way that no other director gets. Like, his Superman is what we aspire to, what we hope to. This older version of Americana, the possibilities here. Like, and also that screwball comedy between Margot Kidder and Christopher Reeve. Like, I think people forget that screwball comedy between these two characters is almost, it's like kind of key to showing Superman on screen. And I think it was really masterful of Donner to recognize that, to actually say, no, we're going to embrace this goofy screwball type of comedy because it's part of the character. It's part of who these people are. Again, but still at the same time making it real. Like, everyone's been sharing this video online, but I go back to the scene where it's when he's about to take Lois on a date, and he's thinking about revealing himself to be Superman, and it's just visual storytelling in the most perfect way possible. He's not saying a bit of dialogue. Everything is body language, and you know exactly what's going through Christopher Reeve's mind, his expressions, everything. And that is just masterful acting, obviously, from Christopher Reeve, but also the direction from Donner is superb. And yeah, with the Lethal Weapon movies, like, I like that he took the buddy cop genre and sort of put his own like political leanings in there and created a deeper story with troubled characters. Like, I think he really took the surface level of what's a buddy cop movie and just really enriched it and infused it with more realism. And it became very much like Superman is the blueprint for comic book movies. Lethal Weapon is pretty much the blueprint for buddy cop movies. Movie studios going forward, right, we're going to make our buddy cop movie. Who's going to be our Riggs and who's going to be our Murtaugh? Everybody's looking at that sort of dynamic and chemistry when you're doing a buddy cop movie. And with Lethal Weapon, look, this is made in the 80s. Not only it's an interracial buddy cop movie, which is crazy for the time, but it's a guy dealing with suicide in the 80s. That is so groundbreaking. The way Mel Gibson plays Martin Riggs and is dealing with suicide throughout the movie and the reasons why. And then at the end of the movie, like with a lot of movies nowadays, they sort of bring up these topics and then they're not spoken about for the rest of the film. But he brings it back to that at the end of the movie when Riggs gives Murtaugh the bullet that he was going to kill himself with at the beginning as a Christmas gift. And for me, that it's the movie saying that he is now ready to move on with his life. He's ready to embrace his life. This is the 80s, man. This is really powerful stuff to be, this is a decade where it's full of machismo and being manly and testosterone, Die Hard and all these like really macho action films. And here you have this macho guy dealing with some real issues here that were not talked about in the 80s. So that's another thing you have to commend Donna for infusing these real topics that people at the time were too scared to touch.
I have to fully agree with that. And just like going back to what you said, but like everyone kind of wants their Riggs and Murtaugh. Fact is, you can't replicate that. Just like what Donna brought out of like both actors, just like the dynamic between the two of them, the banter between the two of them, it just felt so natural and free flowing. It was almost like he was just letting the guys be themselves. And I just don't think you can replicate that. I think only Donna was able to like bring that sort of like banter to the table. And like, that's one thing I always like praise in Lethal Weapon above everything else is just how the characters interact and how all the dialogue just feels like natural. Like it doesn't feel scripted. It feels like they're just having like normal, natural conversations in the flow of things. And just their comedy timing is also great. And I think that can also be attributed to Donna as well. So yeah, high praise for the Lethal Weapon films.
Yeah, man. I mean, I think like when we talk about the directors that really inspire us, we talk about the Scorseses, we talk about the Spielbergs, modern day we have James Gunn, Taika Waititi, Patty Jenkins, all these directors that inspire us. But I honestly I don't think Donner gets enough credit. I really don't think his name comes up in the conversation enough. And it's a shame because if you look at what he did, he really did define what what we think of as the movies that we love, the types of movies that we love, and inspired a lot of other filmmakers that we love. I think he just had such a profound effect on pop culture in general. The very things we talk about here on CCM, we probably wouldn't be doing this podcast if it wasn't for him. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's absolutely true. In regards to the Lethal Weapon thing, I mean, you mentioned the line earlier about the just been revoked, but for me, it's always I'm getting too old for this shit, and you've just got that he brought us that. That's a choice at the end of the day. He could have said no.
Yeah.
But he said, no, get them saxophones in there and get some guitar, and we're playing that. We're getting that over the top. I love it. Comedic timing, I think, is one of the things I was going to mention there, which was briefly mentioned, like his... the film Maverick in particular, which is based off the TV show. I remember watching that and growing up on that film as a kid because, in fact, I do believe I watched that before Lethal Weapon. So when I was old enough, when I was 2 years older to watch Lethal Weapon, it was quite a shock to watch quite a violent movie made by the guy who made Goonies and Superman and Maverick, because Maverick is a very playful Western about a guy who just rigs people off in poker tournaments and does really good poker, and it's a really charming film. And the comedy in that film in particular is what works for that film. And again, I don't think you wouldn't have that without, of course, the actors and the script was in there, but then you have the playfulness of the direction from Donner as well. And something that I think has been brought up the most, and I think it could be summed up in a word, which is heart. Donner had so much heart in these movies, which is why we believe in the films that he brought us. Like, as you said, the tortured mind of Riggs in Lethal Weapon, that's down to, us feeling for him. It's him pulling at our heartstrings. The moment, I have no problem saying this, yes, they bored my eyes out once again in the scene where and I completely forgot this as well. It's a one-take sequence when Clark and Jonathan Kent are talking about his powers and saying, you're better than kicking footballs. You're here for a reason, son. And it's a one-take sequence. And he said, well, why don't you catch up with me now, Dad? Goes to run off. And, he has that heart attack in that moment. And even then, like, the choice to just have it in one static shot, like one continuous shot, and then it stops and holds on that moment, and cutting back to several wide shots of that, it's harrowing. And I bawled my eyes out because of it, because it's just... And even the Lois Lane death sequence in Superman 1 as well. The choice even to go to several wides to show the isolation of this great superhero standing tall, but ultimately feeling and being completely alone in that moment it's fucking harrowing. And it's down to choice there from Donner as well. And yeah, heart is such a key thing in any director, but Richard Donner very much embodied that. And one thing he said recently, because I've rewatched a lot of clips of him talking at, as I said, the American Film Institute and briefly at the BFI, he said, the one thing that I love about my job is that I meet a friend on each shoot. I meet a new person. I meet a new friend for the rest of my life. And again, my heart just sank, because I'm like, he's right. In each new production you do, you meet somebody new each time. And, he was able to say to people like, I got to meet Mel Gibson and got to work with him several times, not just on the Lethal Weapon films, but on other films. I got to, work with other great talent and pursue, their creative endeavors. And I became friends with them. And, he's not just someone who was a great director, but he was a great collaborator and a great friend to many people. So, and you can see why that so many people were inspired by him, because it's not just the work that he's done, but he was just a wonderful, loving friend and human being. So, yeah, that's my heart there. He took my heart, put it that way.
Well said.
So, yeah.
Well said.
Well said. And honestly, I don't know how either of us could top that. But unless, Tom, you have any other final things you'd like to say about Richard Donner?
Just that I'd like to thank him for the scene in Lethal Weapon 2 where Riggs has to defuse a bomb whilst Murtaugh is sitting on the toilet, because that is one of the finest scenes and funniest scenes in all of cinema.
All right,
it is.
Tell you what, I'll have that as yours. So I'll give mine, and then I'll go to you, Rob, to close us out. But we're gonna go. If you can think of one, your favorite Dick Donner scene in any of his films. I'm going to go... It's going to tie into what you were saying about his one continuous shot on the Kent farm. But I'm going to go to a more... when he's using it a lot more playfully. And this is in the Daily Planet. And it's the continuous shot of Perry White exiting his office, going into, meet all his minions. And as the camera moves, it's just following the different conversations. It is flawless filmmaking. It is absolutely incredible how you follow all these different characters, all their different conversations. You're not lost in any way, and at the same time, there's so much going on in front of you because it's quite hectic. There's a lot of stuff in frame, but you're still continuously following on all these characters' conversations, and you're not lost in any way. It's absolutely perfect. Absolutely perfect. So that's one that screams to me. What about you, Rob?
Again, that's just craft. That's just pure craft on his part, just understanding the language of cinema. And, you have to remember at this point, he'd just done The Omen, and then he's given Superman, and he's got to do Superman 2 back to back. Finding that continuity between those two films, that's nuts. That's really insane. Also, I didn't... this isn't my scene, by the way, but this is something I noticed when rewatching. I think it's the quickest I've ever seen... and correct me if I'm wrong, because there may be many other examples, but I thought this was genius when I saw this. It's the quickest I've seen to a setup to another movie very quickly. In the first 5 minutes, you've basically set up Superman 2. All right, there's Zod, there's his minions, Phantom Zone, done. I didn't realise it until I watched it again. I was like, I didn't realise it was that quick that he sets up Superman 2 that quickly. Because you look at, the modern Marvel movies and stuff, and they take pretty much half the movie kind of setting up a lot of stuff. I just found that remarkable. But the scene of choice I'm definitely going to go for is, I mean, I said earlier, the playful I spent the night with Superman scene is just a wonderfully directed sequence all the way through. I mean, not just the sit down sequences, the whole, do you like pink? I like pink very much, Lois. I think the coverage there is lovely, and even the taking off and the way that they fly through Metropolis, I think many people could have just looked at that and gone, oh, it's just a throwaway moment. We don't need any of this. But, the choice to have the actors, the way it's framed, the way it's lit, the score from John Williams. I mean, my God, he got John Williams involved in this. My fucking God, what a choice that is.
Just after Star Wars as well.
Exactly. It's just an incredible choice from a director just to go, how about John Williams? Can we get it? Obviously by this point, I think the 78 Oscars may have come around and, Star Wars was nominated and won, I think, the Academy Award. So again, there's that choice. But again, I messaged you again last night, Jake, because there are moments in that movie in particular which just still carry me even to this day, and I still use. And that's what movies are all about. They stick with you in your mind and your heart, and you're able to just quote them instantly. And things like Otis, please take the gentleman's cape, like things like that. And oh, come in, it's open. I think that's all. It's just pure comedic timing from Gene Hackman and the great Ned Beatty, I should mention as well, who we sadly lost as well. A terrific actor as well. And of course, Chris Reeve in that scene and Miss Tessmacher. All of it works. And to bounce all those characters and all of that scene together in just such a playful scene, which again, I think if you were to throw it back to, say, the 60s Batman television series, probably been more goofier. But here, it's intelligent, crafted, heartfelt filmmaking at its best. And that is exactly what Richard Donner was. A craftsman and a wonderful human being through and through. And may he rest.
May he rest indeed. The world is a lesser place without him. Let's just say that. But yeah, again, so thank you, Rob, for coming on. It's been a pleasure speaking to you and celebrating Richard Donner and his movies. And all I can say to you people is just go out and do what we've been doing, celebrating Richard Donner and his films. Watch them all, or watch the ones you like. Watch Superman, Lethal Weapon, The Goonies. If you're a horror fan, watch The Omen. He's just a master at film in general, and he's dipped his toe in all sorts of different genres. So, yeah, just celebrate the life and work of Richard Donner. And, so that's it from us then. Thank you for tuning into this. We'll see you all very soon. Bye-bye.
It's an extraordinary experience. I sat here and listened and watched, and I really said, is that me? Somebody said it earlier. It's all confusing now, but I never did pay dues. People would say, well, you paid your dues. I never did. I've been the luckiest person in the world. This business has been incredible. I've had nothing but friends. Nora Ephron told Lauren produced a wonderful picture with Nora, and Nora told Lauren, she said, in every movie you make, the one good thing about it is you come out with a new friend. And it's so true. But I came out with so many of them. It's extraordinary. This industry is my friend. And it's been just the greatest gift in the world to me.